Hi, my name is Trevor Klee. I'm a GMAT tutor. I scored 750 on my own GMAT, starting from about a 600. And I wanted to talk about how you can, do the same on your GMAT. So this guide is, partially what I did and then partially what I sort of figured out along the way. Because if I just explained what I did, you'd realized that maybe a month in I realized I was studying the wrong way and had to revise my studying. So this is the right way to study for the GMAT. So let's start with the start. How do you start preparing for the GMAT? Well, I always tell people to start off with the diagnostic test. You really want to jump in, sort of feet first. Some people are like, oh, I'm going to start off by reading a bunch of books and watching videos and whatever. But you need context. Like, you're not going to get context just by, watching the videos. Once you take the diagnostic test, you know what you're starting from. And then you'll also be able to get a good idea of what your, sort of how realistic your goal is. And you'll also be able to understand like the tips and techniques and everything. And when you take your diagnostic test, after you take it, pat yourself on the back and then figure out your specific strengths and weaknesses. Um, and I think that's very important that you're like thinking specifically, which topics am I going to cover? And you want to get as deep as possible. So, instead of just saying like, oh, quant, maybe go a little bit deeper and say problem solving. Then maybe go a little bit deeper and say geometry, right? So you can keep going a little deeper, and that'll give you a good idea of what a study plan is. This is also a good chance to start using an error log. So an error log, basically all the questions that you have trouble with on the GMAT are going to go in this error log, starting with the diagnostic test all the way up to test day. You're going to use these to understand which questions you get wrong. You're also going to use this to practice doing these questions the right way. And you're also going to do this to, so let's say, understand, practice, and last, you're going to use this to review old questions so you don't forget them. So these are, all stuff you'll use the error log for. I have an app for it. It's called 21st Night, which you can check out. It also has like practice questions and strategies and study plans in there. But you can also use a spreadsheet if you're, don't feel like doing that. You just have to be very organized with the spreadsheet. So once you figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are, and once you've gotten, really specific, you want to start focusing on your weaknesses, which I'm gonna underline that. Focus on your weaknesses. Like sometimes people are like, I always say that, and people are like, oh yeah, duh. Of course I'll focus on my weaknesses, and then I'll see them like a month later, and they're like, I got like a 40 on quant and a 20 on verbal, and I've spent all of my time on quant. And it's like, no, don't do that. You got a 20 on verbal. You need to focus way more time on verbal. Um, so where are your questions coming from? The official guide. Like that is your best source of questions. If you want to like practice strategies, you might use a different source, like my guides, for instance. But you're the end test of how good you are in the GMAT is the official guide. So initially, you're not going to worry about speed, right? Sometimes people are like, oh, I want to time myself from the very beginning. Don't time yourself from the very beginning. Wait to time yourself. You first just want to be confident. You want to get from the beginning to the end of a question with no pauses, hesitation. That's your goal. Once you can get there, speeding it up is really easy. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. If you can do a question start to finish without pausing it, you can speed it up. If you have pauses, or if you start over in the middle, well, you're gonna have a rough time of it, because you're not gonna be able to speed up. You're just gonna get faster to the point where you make a mistake and then you get the question wrong. So focus on being smooth. And then once you've covered all your weaknesses, you feel really confident, you've understood the questions you've got wrong, you've practiced the questions you've got wrong, and you've reviewed the questions you've got wrong, take another practice test. See where your score's at. And all of these practice tests, by the way, should be coming from MBA.com. These are the official practice tests. Don't waste your time with non-official practice tests. So, overall advice. There's two parts to studying for the GMAT. One part's like being a marathon runner. Draw a little running guy here. Ooh. One part's like being a marathon runner. You got to put the miles in. You got to do the questions, get them wrong, learn how to do them right, revise and repeat. Like you just got to do them. Do questions, get them wrong, figure out how to do them right, do more questions, right? And the getting them wrong is important. If you're never getting questions wrong, you're doing the wrong questions. Sort of like when people say, like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. If every question you do, you get correct, you need to do more difficult questions. Like you're not using your time very well. So the other part of GMAT studying is like being your own coach, or you might say being your own tutor. You know, you need to actually think like, okay, what questions am I getting wrong? Why am I getting them wrong? What questions should I do in the future to like practice these ideas? Uh, Sometimes I get students who are like very hard workers, but they just like grind and they just do. They're just like, oh, every day I do 50 questions, and I'm like, okay, which 50 questions? And they're like, whatever. And I say, well, that's not really helpful. It'd be much better to do 25 questions and really think about them. Really think about, okay, what are these questions telling me? Why am I getting stuff wrong and right? Like that'd be way better and way more useful for your studying. So be your own tutor or hire a tutor like me. All right. So materials. Materials you need. Official GMAT prep tests. Super important. Official guide questions. I'd recommend just going on GMAT Club because they have copied all the official guide questions onto their website, which may be illegal, but they did it anyways, and so you don't need to actually buy the official guide. But you do need to do those questions. And then you need an error log. I said here the error log app, which again, 21st night, super helpful, would recommend it. But, again, if you're cheap or if you don't trust me or whatever, you can use a spreadsheet. Either way, you really should be using an error log. Like, it's going to make your life so much better. Um, Optional, you can use strategy guides. You can use my strategy guides, available on gumroad.com/Trevor Klee. I also have stuff on my YouTube channel for my strategy guides. Manhattans aren't bad. They're a little overwhelming, though. Um, if you want to use like some sort of online software sort of thing, Target Test Prep is good for quant. Prep for quant. There's no other ones I'd really recommend. I know everyone ends up using Magoosh. I don't think Magoosh is particularly good. I don't see great results from Magoosh, so I wouldn't recommend it. So what is your study plan? Well, your overall study plan is assume that you need 100 hours for 100 points. So, and in that 100 hours, you're doing what we talked about. You're being the marathon runner and the coach, right? So if you're starting from like a 500 and you want to go to 700, assume 200 hours. That might go up or down depending on you, depending on how well you can be your own coach, depending on how good your studying is. But I mean, that's the general idea. I usually tell people to do 10 to 15 hours a week. More is better, but that's a good target to aim for. Don't do less than that. 5 hours a week is not going to get you anywhere. It's just you're going to waste a lot of time because you're going to spend half your time trying to remember what you did before. It's really not a good way to improve. Just make the GMAT like a big part of your life for a small amount of time. and that's going to make your life. That's the best way to make your studying go well. You know, do 2 to 3 months. Just part-time job done. If you want a really specific study plan, I have an email course. Also have study plans on 21st Night. Um, you don't need a super specific study plan, but I understand a lot of people like them. All right. So now, when you're looking back at questions, which, as I said, super important part of studying, it's really important to think like, how do I intelligently look back at these questions? Well, first of all, look at it through an error log perspective. You get a question wrong, you look back. And here are the questions you need to ask yourself. So in reading comp, what precisely did I need to read to get the right answer? Sometimes, like, people always get confused on reviewing reading comp because they're like, oh, now that I know the right answer, it seems super obvious. Well, what was your process supposed to be? How were you supposed to know the right answer, right? How were you supposed to, analyze the passage to get to the correct answer? Super important. Critical reasoning, how does the argument work, right? How does the correct answer fit into the argument? Every critical reasoning question is an argument. Therefore, something, something, something. Because something, 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 right? Because, all men are mortal, and because Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal, right? How does the correct answer fit into this? How does it strengthen it or weaken it or provide an assumption that goes into it, right? Um, Sentence correction. Ooh, there's a grammatical issue here. How does the correct answer correctly and efficiently convey the meaning? That's a important part of sentence correction. People always think sentence correction is about memorizing idioms, and like that's so wrong. Sentence correction is logic. It is a logic puzzle. You have your grammar rules. There's not that many of them. I have a video on here where I talk about literally all the grammar you'll need to know for sentence correction. But, go from there. You need to like figure out, okay, what is the logic of sentence correction? How is the correct answer efficiently and grammatically correctly conveying this meaning in a way that the incorrect answer isn't? This is especially important for like 700 plus questions, because 700 plus questions will have a bunch of ones that are correct, right? Grammatically correct, correct, correct. But only one of them will efficiently convey the meaning, right? That's the correct answer. So it's always a logic question. You always start off with what's the meaning? All right, problem solving, aka quant. I always tell people, what do you need to start with? How did you know that's how you needed to start the question? Sometimes people are like, yeah, problem solving is really easy, except for like, I have trouble starting it. And it's like, that is literally the most important step. Being able to recognize the patterns in problem solving and like being able to say, oh, that's a rate question. I need to do my rate equation. Oh, that's a work question. I need to do my work equation. Like those sorts of patterns are so important in problem solving. Like the number one reason people have trouble with like quant is they never bother to figure out the patterns, and they try to like invent a brand new method of solving quant questions like every time they approach a new quant question, and it just like it's exhausting, and there's no way to do that correctly. But you do if you make an effort to really recognize these patterns, it's going to be way better. Meanwhile, data sufficiency, it's a different sort of thing. In data sufficiency, we're always looking at simplifying the prompt, right? So we get down to what is the question really asking for? And then we can go back to problem solving, right? Once you know what the question's asking for, they'll have like a bunch of weird words. They might have like a long, complicated equation, and you need to simplify it down to a small one, and then you'll know how to start. But it's always like, how was I supposed to know how to start this? Because like, you got to simplify, 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 and then you're like, okay, I recognize this from problem solving. All right. And that's pretty much, what you need to be asking yourself. And then if you get really stuck and you need GMAT tutoring, uh, yeah, like, do it if you messed up on a practice test or if you're overwhelmed. But please start with self-studying. Like, you can do it. I don't know you probably, unless you're someone who I do know, but I probably don't know you. But I still think you can start with self-studying. I still think as long as you're okay with this whole thing of like, I'm going to look at my diagnostic test, I'm going to analyze my diagnostic test, and I'm going to do questions that I have trouble with. And then when I do them, I'm going to figure out how to do them right. As long as you're okay with that thing, you will be totally okay to go from like a 750 or go to a 750 on your own GMAT. Like, no matter who you are, seriously. All right, cool. So that's my brief guide slash rant on how I got a 750 on the GMAT, how you could get a 750 on the GMAT. If you want more stuff like this, like, subscribe. I'll be putting out more videos. I have lots of videos on my channel. If you want, you can check out my app or my guides. I'll link them in the description. Check out my website. It's just my name, Trevor Klee, and then tutor.com. Yeah, and let me know how it goes. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'd be happy to help. All right, thanks.